You're tuned in to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Hello, Bear Down Believers, and welcome into the show. This is the Sunday Six Pack, and I am your host, Matt Reynoldson. On some game days, especially after a late game like last night's 8 p.m. kickoff against Texas Tech, we'll do a Sunday Six Pack. And today we're breaking down 6 things about Texas Tech's 28-22 win over Arizona. Tough loss in the Big 12 home opener for the Wildcats, 28-22, the final of that. So today we'll run through 2 positives, 2 negatives, and 2 things to look ahead as Arizona now hits the road next week to BYU to face maybe the Big 12's best team on the road at BYU in Provo, Utah, a top 20 team, a top 20 outfit there on the road as Arizona tries to get its second consecutive Big 12 ranked road win. Before we get rolling on this show, I want to remind you to please like and subscribe to the program over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also check all of these videos out on my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldson. Please give me a subscription over there as well. We also want to talk to you a little bit about what brings this podcast to you today, and that's brought to you in part by Melon Hats. These babies, comfort, durability, perfect fit, exactly what you want in a hat. You can dress it up, you can dress it down, wear it to game day, wear it to the tailgate, wear it to the gym, wear it to the beach, the pool, wherever you want. I mean, it's such a durable and versatile hat. Never stinks, always keeps its shape, always keeps its form. And it's built to last 5 times longer than any other hat. So this should be a staple of your wardrobe. Actually had a good conversation the other night at a restaurant with a bartender there that was wearing one of these Melon hats. Looked quite a little bit like mine. So they're getting more popular. Get on the train early on and get yourself one of these Melon hats over at melin.com. All right, let's talk about Arizona's 28-22 loss to Texas Tech in the Big 12 home opener. This one was disappointing. And before we get into the Sunday six-pack, just want to give my overall thoughts on this game. And one of the big overarching takeaways was that Arizona just did not finish in this game. There were plenty of opportunities for Arizona to come back and get this game, even despite the disastrous second quarter. But the finishing plays were just not there. And it's so tough, especially in those late game sequences, when perhaps your 2 best players, when perhaps the 2 players on your roster with the brightest NFL future, the most long-term football future ahead of them in Tetairoa McMillan and Tyler Loop, make back-breaking mistakes in the final moments. I'm talking about Tetairoa McMillan's fumble on the drive that set up Texas Tech to go up 2 scores late in the fourth quarter when Arizona was driving to take the lead. And then before that, Arizona had a chance to take a 19-18 lead, and Tyler Loop missed a 48-yarder. Hard to crush 33 too much on that. He was 5 for 6 on field goals. Definitely the savior for Arizona's sputtering offense throughout the game, but you can't miss it in that spot. You just can't. I mean, 5 for 6 is still great, but a 48-yarder, especially when he is Mr. Consistent. He's got the biggest leg of anybody I've seen in college football this year, probably the front runner for the Lou Groza Award, but you can't miss that in that spot, and that's just such a tough spot to be in for Tyler Loop. I want to roll through some things about this game that were frustrating to me. I think the second quarter was just a huge detriment to Arizona's chances to win in this game. And I don't think it was necessarily focus. I did, kind of watching the game, it did seem like Arizona was maybe lacking focus on the details and things like that. But watching it back on replay this morning and looking at some of the things that this football team put out there, I think it was a lack of commitment to physicality early on. There were multiple times when Arizona could not get 1 yard against one of the Big 12's worst rated rush defenses. And it looked like this Texas Tech defense had everything figured out of what Arizona was going to do in the run game. And the running offense in the first half was just not where it needed to be. I mean, especially in the first quarter, 7 carries for 9 yards. I mean, that's pretty bad. That is not where you need to be as far as a play calling standpoint, yards per play standpoint. Arizona averaged only 2.9 yards per play in the first quarter. 1 for 4 on third downs. The third down issue killed them all night, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the first half was not where you wanted it to be. I think the first quarter was better, but the first quarter set up for the disaster of a second quarter in which Arizona turned the ball over twice, 2 tough interceptions for Noah Fafita. The second one really bad that led to a 6-point swing because the Wildcats were in field goal range. Noah threw a pick in the end zone. Texas Tech drove it all the way down the field and kicked a chip shot field goal to go up 18-3 in the half. Legitimately, it should have been at that point 15-6 at half. And 18-3, as we saw at the end of the game with a 6-point final margin, that 6 points matters. You need your quarterback, you need your veteran quarterback to make a better decision there and not just bomb it toward the end zone. That is not understand the time, the score, the situation. And we'll get into this a little bit because I think that there were positions that the coaching staff did not put Noah in that they should have put him in that puts this maybe not all on number 11's shoulders. But his dad tweeted this morning, we ride the highs, we ride the lows. Tough game for Noah last night, everything like that. So look, I mean, the kid takes ownership. He's a great individual, great human, great leader on this team. But in certain spots and certain situations, he has to play better. And he knows that. He'd be the first one to tell you that. But tough one for Noah last night. Tough one in crunch time for T-Mac with that fumble, getting the ball stripped out by a defensive back, something that, can't happen in that spot. It just can't. Tough one for Tyler Loop, missing the 48-yarder. Did bounce back and drilled a 52-yarder to get it within 6. And honestly kicked a pretty good onside to put them in position to potentially go win the game. But, you can't rely on a bounce at that point. And Arizona didn't get the bounce. Texas Tech recovers the onside kick, and that was curtains for this ball game. Not what you wanted if you're an Arizona fan. Not what you wanted to see in the Big 12 opener. Look, I'm going to address this just because it was addressed by Brent Brennan last night. Because it was very obvious on TV. I was thinking about going to the game last night, but with the late start and everything that goes into this production, chose not to go down to Tucson. Going to wait for that Colorado game and the West Virginia game here in 2 and 3 weeks. 8 p.m. start is a tough spot. I get Fox wants to still fit 3 football games on its Fox schedule with the Major League Baseball game in the playoffs, but 8 p.m. local time start, 11 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. Why are you scheduling that, first of all? So I get it if the crowd didn't show up because it was such a late start. But my goodness, that was, for the Big 12 home opener, coming off a top 10 win, the crowd was pretty pitiful. I mean, the tickets are available, not super expensive. I know the Colorado game sold out. Props to U of A fans for that. But this team needs your support, and they want your support, and they're begging for it. And yeah, maybe they've got to be, a little bit more out there in the community and everything like that, asking for support and being present and being there instead of, relying on the strong finish to last season. But I mean, coming off a top 10 win, going into your first home game as a member of the Big 12 Conference, first Big 12 home game, for that to be the crowd, and I saw it 30 minutes before kickoff, and I'm like, it's got to fill in a little bit more than this, right? And it didn't. I mean, props to the students. Students are carrying this crowd right now. The Zona Zoo is packed full, but I mean, the rest of the stadium looks pretty sparse, and that's not what you want to see for a team on the fringe of the top 25 that just got done knocking off and really handling a top 10 team on the road. You want some more support than that, especially against a team, a new fresh face coming into Arizona Stadium. So was a little disappointed with the crowd last night, but it did play a factor, and people got more into it late in the game, especially as Arizona started to come back. But, the crowd was a little disappointing from my aspect last night. And, let's hope that improves against Colorado so those Buff fans don't take over Arizona Stadium, because I know it would make me sick to my stomach to see a lot of black and gold in those stands. I hope as an Arizona fan, it would make you sick too. So make sure that doesn't happen. Make sure it's a red and blue game on October 19th when Colorado comes to town for homecoming. I know homecoming in Tucson is always a great weekend to come back. All right, let's get into it. Got my notes right here. Got my notes of the positives, the negatives, and the things to look ahead to. The Sunday six-pack here on the Bleav in Arizona podcast. We're breaking down Texas Tech's 28-22 victory over Arizona. Let's start with the positives, because we like to do a little negativity sandwich here. Positive bread, looking ahead bread, negativity in the middle. So obviously there's a lot of negatives. Obviously they're glaring, but the positives were the defense, especially in that second half, and forcing turnovers, especially forcing 2 forced fumbles against Taj Brooks, the first time that has ever happened to the Texas Tech running back in his entire career. That was super impressive. This defense stood tall and held Texas Tech down in the second half of this game. The third quarter saw no first downs for Texas Tech. 17 total yards, 6 rushes, 4 passes, a total of 17 total yards, 0 of 2 on third downs, a 1.7 yards per play average in the third quarter, and 1 penalty to boot. I mean, that was as impressive of a quarter as I've seen for Arizona in a long time, and it helped the offense and the special teams get things rolling to a 13-0 advantage in the third quarter. By the start of the fourth, all the momentum was on Arizona's side. The defense did their part. And yeah, I mean, you can criticize them for spots. You can criticize them for not being strong at stopping the run early, for Texas Tech's script, getting them out to a 7-0 lead, everything like that. But in reality, in that second quarter, it was the turnovers, it was the bad spots leading to Arizona's defense, having a really rough time with it. But 300, if you give up 330-ish total yards to a team like Texas Tech, who knows how to get it up the field, only 214 yards passing and no passing touchdowns in this game for Tech, that's pretty impressive defensive performance. That should win you these games. And it didn't in this situation. But Arizona's defense played well enough to win. Those 2 forced fumbles were huge. Arizona capitalized on them in big spots. The offense has got to do more with it, but the defense was so impressive. Great defense, turnovers, everything like that. Dalton Johnson leading the way with 8 total tackles. I know he hasn't been healthy for a lot of the season. He was working his way back last week, had a good game against Utah, but Traden Stukes being out, Gunnar Maldonado going down in the first half, I just felt like guys went and showed up. Trey Smith getting his first sack of the season after what seems like 20,000 total pressures. Jacob Manu had probably his best game of the season so far. I mean, I saw Manu step up last night and make some big time plays. And, he had a pass breakup that was big in a very big spot, 7 total tackles to be tied for second on the team in this game. He was impressive. Tacario Davis felt like he was carrying a little too much of the secondary, especially after Maldonado went out with that injury. So you don't have 2 of your starting defensive backs, and you're just asking Bobo to do it all. And I think the most glaring play on that was after Maldonado got injured and the immediate substitution in there at safety, there was a miscommunication in the back end that led to Davis getting beat by a freshman for that long pass play to set up Texas Tech's first touchdown. So I don't think Tacario Davis played probably his best game. I don't think he was bad by any means. 4 tackles, no pass breakups today after having 5 last week. Again, not his best game, but I don't think he played poorly. I just think he was roving too much of the secondary, having to do too much in this game. And, I just think we saw a really good defensive performance last night. I think we saw a carryover of a strong defensive performance against Utah. And I think we saw a team, a defense that can, win some games for Arizona down the stretch of this season. If there were glaring issues other than just finishing this ball game, other than just rough spots with quarterback play, rough spots with turnovers, rough spots with this, that, the other thing, I think we would be maybe a little bit more concerned about Arizona football. But the thing is, and some people accuse me of being too rosy, fine, accuse me of being too rosy. What I saw last night was a loss because of loss of opportunity. It wasn't a loss because Arizona was the worst team on the field. I thought they made mistakes at poor times, but I don't think they looked necessarily poorly coached. I thought they had gaps in communication and the game plan and a lot of things, especially in the second quarter. But we also saw a team just completely flip that second quarter in the third and come out and play really good football in all 3 phases. You just sometimes see the ball bounce the other way. Look, Alabama plays Vandy. 99 out of 100 times, Bama's winning that game. But Vandy had a great game plan. Few balls bounce their way. They knock off number 1. first ever top 5 win for Vanderbilt as a program. It happens. It's college football. This game, I think this result was a lot more explainable than the Kansas State result. They got run off the field in Manhattan. Yeah, they just did. Like, there were a lot of cracks in the foundation there. And I think they patched a lot of those last week. But coming back home, they had to play better at the start of this game. The physicality needed to be better, everything like that. But the defense, I Bleav, especially in the second half, showed a lot of physicality, very impressive, just a very impressive resolve all the way kind of throughout the night. And unfortunately, they were not rewarded for it. But defense and forcing turnovers, especially 2 forced fumbles against Taj Brooks, I'm going to mark that as a positive in the book. My number 2 positive for this team in this game was Quali Conley. We really saw the Arizona starting running back break out in this game for 97 yards. He was super impressive. Let's look at the stats here. 14 carries for 97 yards, an average of 6.9 yards per carry, and 1 touchdown. I mean, Conley was so huge in the second half. He was the guy that really looked like the bell cow running back. And Kedrick Reesano played okay, but 10 carries for 20 yards with an average of 2, that's not going to get it done. And nobody else got a carry on this offense. Noah Fafita, a couple scrambles, a couple sacks taken, 121 rushing yards is probably not going to get it done as an outfit, especially against this Texas Tech run defense. But I thought in the second half, they really found a rhythm with balance. They really found a rhythm with finding the spots to use Conley. Now, they went away from that several times, which is something that I'll talk about in my negatives, but I really feel like we saw Conley take a big step last night, a step as far as physicality. I was watching it with some friends, and I remember remarking, oh, that was a big run by Reesano. He just ran somebody over. And they said, no, that was Quali Conley. So Conley, with a sneaky amount of physicality, that was just so impressive to see, and to see what he can be as far as a starting running back for probably the next 2 years for Arizona. I know he wasn't slated to be the starter this year. Still no update on the eligibility concerns with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. So Bill's still waiting on a potential waiver for him as the NCAA drags their feet, as always, worrying about his eligibility and trying to figure that out. Hopefully at some point during the month of October, we at least get some semblance of answers. But as of right now, Quali Conley is your starting running back and Kedrick Reesano is your backup. And you don't even have Speedy Luke back there as your third string. So we'll see if Johnson gets some more carries, and we'll see if Arizona gets a true stable of running backs right there. But if they don't, I think we saw a lot from Conley last night that he could be that true bell cow back. And, he showed that, still didn't break the century mark, but showed that he can still be, a very much a factor in this Arizona offense. All right, time to get to the big questions, the big topics at hand, because when you lose at home, Big 12 home opener against a Texas Tech team that was not ranked, they're a good team, they're 5-1, they're going to go to a bowl game, they're going to be in contention for this Big 12 conference, but that was a team Arizona was better than. And I think there are a few key reasons why Texas Tech came in and won at Arizona Stadium. The first one is, unfortunately, the new play caller. The biggest gap, the biggest difference between week 1 and week 2 as a new play caller, especially as a play caller that had just called his first game at the FBS level last week at Utah, he caught Utah by complete surprise. The difference is, against a veteran coaching staff like Joey McGuire has at Texas Tech, when you know your play calling, when you start to put together your game plan, if you're a brand new play caller, you can show tendencies in just one game of tape. You know what you can't scout? The tendencies in yourself after just one game of tape when you don't have a lot of play calling experience. Now, Dino Babers is a veteran play caller, been a veteran head coach. He could tell Matt Atkins, the Arizona tight ends coach and passing game coordinator, the new play caller for the Wildcats. He could tell Atkins some trends, some tendencies that he showed against Utah that other coaches may try to exploit, but you don't know until you don't know about yourself. And that was the situation I felt like in the first half, and especially in the second quarter with Atkins last night. There was not enough run-to-pass ratio for this game. 30 rushes to 49 passes. I know they were playing catch-up a lot of the second half, but the first half was not balanced where you wanted it to be either. First half was 20 passes, 13 rushes. So for as many times as they had to throw it in the second half, they found a little more balance in the second half than you would probably expect for a team that went into the locker room down 2 touchdowns. But what Atkins did was he showed a lot of tendency, especially in the run game, of how they were planning to get 1 yard, or what they were planning to do with their fullbacks, what they were planning to do with heavy sets. Not giving enough answers, not self-scouting enough against a pretty good coaching staff to not be predictable. And it looked predictable in the first half. And it didn't help that there wasn't a lot of execution by the players. That was a frustrating part of this. It didn't help that, your quarterback did not play well, didn't take the solutions. But, man, like, the biggest thing with the highest level offensive coaches in both college football and the NFL is they give the quarterback solutions. Noah Fifita is still a sophomore. He's a sophomore. He's not going to have every answer on the football field all the time. And when he plays a game like last week, where he played hero against a Utah team that battered and bruised him all over the field, he's going to think he can play hero ball a couple more times. It happens. And the dude's barely 20 years old. Like, he's a sophomore. He is a redshirt sophomore. Has not played a whole lot of football at the collegiate level. And when he did last year, quite frankly, Jedd Fisch's offense lends itself to giving a quarterback a solution for every problem he might face, giving him a built-in solution, and not being, oh my goodness, I need to scramble out and make something happen on every single play. I need to do the Caleb Williams USC thing, scramble out and make things happen on every single play, and probably just end up throwing it to T-Mac whenever I get the chance. That doesn't lead itself to the growth of number 11. That doesn't lead itself to Arizona having a successful passing game when number 4 leaves campus. That doesn't lead itself to long-term success in the passing game, even when you have a really good quarterback. So I think what Atkins and Babers and Lyle Moivau need to do is work with Noah to give him answers, to give him solutions to the things that the defense is giving him. Because Texas Tech was giving him things, but you need to run perhaps better route trees. But at the same time, Noah was missing guys open in the flat. Noah was missing guys over the middle. He needs to be told where to look. And he doesn't have to always go there. You don't have to always go towards the read you're told to go to. But he's got to at least look there. And that's where he didn't do it so many times last night. That, I think, led to the 2 second quarter interceptions. Certainly led to the second one, in which he tried to go for T-Mac in double coverage in the end zone. I believe it was T-Mac in double coverage in the end zone, and instead threw a pick in the corner of the end zone with T-Mac really nowhere even near it, when he had 2 guys open in the flat over the middle of the field, and it would have been either an easy field goal, chip shot field goal for Tyler Loop, or having a chance to score a touchdown with 30 seconds left in the half instead of a 6-point swing going the other way. Fifita didn't have options and didn't take said options. He needs to be told and coached up to look for those options, and he'll play better down the stretch. He will. But I think those 2 things, when it came to Matt Atkins, not giving Noah solutions and not self-scouting tendencies, really led to the offensive implosion we saw for parts of the game last night. It was just frustrating to see. It was frustrating to see that be the result of that frustrating offensive performance. And look, it wasn't a brutal offensive performance. I mean, 422 yards should win you a game at home. It should. And, Arizona had a pretty good balance as far as rushing, 301 yards passing. It's a decent game for Noah. But, I mean, the 0 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, that's pretty glaring right there. And it definitely showed up in the second quarter. I think that's where Arizona lost the game. But they came back. They took a lead. They led 19-18 in the fourth quarter. So you got to be able to close it out. And that leads me to my 4th thing in the Sunday six-pack. And the second negative is the inability to finish. That's a mindset thing. Arizona had that mindset last year, had the ability to finish, had the answers, had everything they needed at the right times during that 7-game win streak to end the season. Look, it wasn't all sunshine and roses last year in those games. I mean, Oregon State felt like they had Arizona on the ropes last year in Tucson. Colorado definitely had Arizona on the ropes last year in Boulder. Oklahoma was blitzing Arizona in the first half in San Antonio in the Alamo Bowl. But what Arizona did was it found solutions. It was able to come back and win a game that it didn't have to, that didn't have control over every aspect of things. And look, we've seen that a little bit this year. Minor comebacks against New Mexico and NAU, but this is a different ballgame. And in game 4, Arizona fully controlled the game against Utah. That was a team that played with confidence and just kept the ball rolling and didn't really deal with any adversity until one point in the fourth quarter when they were still up 6. And then they delivered up 6 and closed out the game, and that was impressive. But the inability to finish after this comeback was really crucial. And it was really concerning for this Arizona football team, especially considering that perhaps your two best players, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, made the biggest mistakes. They were the ones that made the biggest mistakes. And Tetairoa McMillan with that huge fumble, and Tyler Loop missing what would have been a go-ahead field goal at that point, with your defense playing incredible football. The inability to finish in the first half, get a yard against this bad Texas Tech rushing defense. I mean, it's not just the end of the game sequence that was tough on finishing. It was, finish the plays in the first half of the game. They didn't do it. I mean, they continually put their defense in a bad position in this game. And the Wildcats need to play complementary football to do this. Now, they're good in special teams. I like the punter. Michael Salgado Medina is a good punter as a true freshman. Looks like Arizona's fairly solid on kick coverage, everything like that. Obviously, Tyler Loop is great, the 48-yard missed field goal notwithstanding. But you've got to figure out a way to finish these games. So with Arizona started with the ball on its own 25-yard line with 2:21 to go. And, the T-Mac fumble was huge. But in the drive before that, Texas Tech started at their own 30-yard line. 4:52 on the clock. It's like, with the defense playing like it did in the second half, I mean, you just can't – you got to finish the game. I know they're tired. I know it's a hot night in Tucson. It's been warm all October so far here in Arizona. But you've got to be able to find a way to close it out within 5 minutes left. And Tech wasn't in a hurry. I mean, the 12-yard pass completion, the 32-yard pass completion to Caleb Douglas, that was over Emmanuel Carnley. I mean, that was a 2nd and 10. It felt like Arizona, especially after the first down and completion, had something going on that drive. That was a huge play where Emmanuel Carnley simply got beat. You've got to be able to get the stop there. And that took a lot of time off the clock. You felt like Arizona was still going to be able to come back. But what about the offense really all night gave you a lot of comfort in that spot? It wasn't like they were moving the ball up and down the field against this Texas Tech team. And frankly, I know that it was a fumble on the very first play, but it felt like an air of panic with this team when Texas Tech retook the lead. It didn't feel like, okay, this is a team that's confident that they're going to come out and go drive the field and win. Sometimes plays like that happen with T-Mac. And, there's nobody that feels worse about it than him. We're going to be talking about it for a long time because, look, frankly, Arizona probably wins that game if T-Mac holds on to the ball there. It's a first down. He fumbled it at Arizona's own 40-yard line. So you think Zona was going to be able to get 20 more yards, 15 more yards even for Tyler Loop's range and kick a game-winning field goal? Yeah, I think I would bet on that. But, sometimes you got to consider that mistakes happen even to the best of your players. And that was a huge one for T-Mac. But it followed, like I mentioned, a mistake by Carnley to let him into field goal range. And then after that, after T-Mac's fumble, Arizona's defense didn't look ready for the quick change either. This was it was like all of the wind was taken out of their sails. The 32-yard rushing touchdown by Taj Brooks for all intents and purposes, plunge the dagger within 2 minutes left. I mean, it just looked like they weren't ready for the one play that Texas Tech was going to run. And that's just brutal. That's brutal. You got to be ready for it. You got to be ready for the quick change. You got to say, okay, this didn't go our way, but we're not taking a defeatist mentality. We can do this. And I hate to put too much on the defense because Arizona's defense definitely carried the Wildcats in this game and carried the Wildcats, really all the way through and gave them a chance to win this game in the second half. But you got to make the stops when it matters. You got to make the plays when it matters. Arizona's defense, Tetairoa McMillan, Tyler Loop, You got to finish the game when it matters. So my number 2 negative for Arizona was the inability to finish in this spot, and therefore it's a 28-22 win for Texas Tech at Arizona Stadium. All right, up next in our Sunday six-pack, we find 2 things to look ahead, and one of them is the run defense. Now, I thought the run defense was solid against Texas Tech, but they're going to face a new challenge against a physical BYU team that knows how to finish those drives, that has the number 1 strength of record metric in college football. That blowout win over Kansas State certainly helped, but this team also has a road win over SMU, which is super impressive. It's becoming super impressive because SMU, I Bleav, is either right on the cusp of the top 25 or just entered the top 25 this week after a 1-score win on the road over Louisville. An absolute banger of a game if you watched it yesterday morning. So BYU has 2 impressive wins there. They are undefeated in Big 12 play, obviously at the top of this conference. They're a top 20 team, and they like to run the football. Can Arizona's run defense show up in a way that it did in the second half of this game? Because, Texas Tech, especially in the second half of this game, really had trouble running the football. 60 total yards in the second half running the football, 118 total yards for the game. That's pretty good run defense. But outside of that 32-yard touchdown run from Taj Brooks at the very end of the game, Texas Tech had 28 rushing yards in the second half. That's what you need to beat a BYU type team. But I saw cracks in the foundation early in the first quarter and late in the fourth quarter. Comes down to finishing, comes down to rounding out the hard edges of this team, rounding out either side of this game, finishing the game, starting the game, finishing the game, knowing that you need to stop the run and run the ball effectively to do that. And Texas Tech ran the ball too easily early and finished the game running the ball. And if you let BYU do that, BYU is going to get a win, and maybe by double digits in Provo. Arizona has found something with rotating in defensive linemen, getting guys into gaps. When Jacob Manu plays the way he did last night, that really increases the chances of Arizona winning and being able to stop the run. But guys like Stanley Taufau, Isaiah Johnson, Tai Uyunglele, Kevon Darton, Trey Smith, Chase Kennedy, so many of these other guys have been really effective at stopping the run and made their presence known on defense last night, especially in the second half, stopping run plays. And, in the second quarter, they were okay stopping the run. But, Texas Tech had so much firepower through the air, over 102 yards passing in the second quarter alone, and that 11-0 advantage in the second quarter, that it's like, okay, you can't really say anything positive about the defense in the second quarter. But that run defense is something that if they can bottle what they did against Taj Brooks, especially punching the ball out twice, forcing those turnovers, that's something that needs to carry over into BYU. It does, because even in a conference like this that's known for flash, high flying, passing the football, everything like that, you need to be able to run the ball and stop the run. And Arizona's shown flashes of that this year. I think it showed more flashes of it last night than perhaps it had, but it didn't round out the entire 60 minutes. And you need to do that against BYU to get a win up in Provo. And the second thing is, and the final thing of our Sunday six-pack of Arizona's 28-22 home loss to Texas Tech, is now they have another road game to potentially block out the negativity. Facing a third straight ranked Big 12 opponent. Obviously, the Kansas State game was not a conference game, but facing a third straight ranked Big 12 opponent on the road, being able to block out the noise, because I think it was really to Arizona's benefit to go to Utah, to go to Salt Lake after that bye week, because it was a bit of a hornet's nest around here. There was a lot of negativity coming from the U of A faithful about the coaching staff, about, the future of this team, looking over the fence at Jed Fish, everything like that, the state of the program. And it was really kind of toxic for a minute there. Especially, you come off a 24-point loss. No fan base is going to be happy, especially going into a bye week and having to sit and stew on it for 2 weeks. But going on the road and kind of being able to block out that noise, and you're in an opposing stadium with very few road fans outside of the families of players, they can just block it out. They can block out the negativity, block out the noise, and go play a football game. Does the same thing happen this Saturday going to BYU? And it's a 1 p.m. kickoff, 2 p.m. in Provo. And BYU has not been very good when the sun's out. I saw an interesting stat last week that they're great in night games and not so good in day games. So maybe that's for an advantage for Arizona to go on the road and face BYU in the middle of the day, potentially hand the Cougars their first loss. But it's an opportunity for Arizona to go block out the negativity and realize, okay, play here, play there, play here, play there. Arizona was like 3 plays away from winning this football game, maybe less. I mean, Arizona was right there in this football game. And yes, the loss is hard to swallow, especially coming off that top 10 win, especially when you're trying to stay in the thick of the Big 12 title race and give yourself a shot at the college football playoff in what has been just a wonky Big 12 conference this year. Kansas is awful. Oklahoma State's awful. Arizona's decent. ASU looks good. West Virginia and Texas Tech at the top of this conference after 2 non-conference losses. It's all over the place right now. But I think that, Arizona needs this road game, needs this road environment to potentially block out that negativity. And I think we'll see the U of A play a little bit less tight next week. And BYU had this week off, so they're facing a team coming off a bye, but they're facing a team coming off a bye that wasn't necessarily prepared for this level of success and notoriety this year. They may be reading the press clippings. And the national TV spotlight game at home, ranked team at home, that's a lot of pressure right there. We saw the pressure somewhat get to Utah, and especially to freshman quarterback Isaac Wilson. That pressure got to him last week, and Arizona forced that pressure. Can the Wildcats capture some of this us against the world mentality and bring it into a big game at BYU? And then maybe move forward and use it later in the conference season to come back home to 2 big home games. The Colorado game's already sold out, so we know there will be some home crowd momentum there. But the West Virginia game the following week is just as big as that one is. So, Arizona is going to have to figure out a way to really dial into what the identity of this team is, what the mentality of this team is. And I think having a road game in this spot, look, if BYU were coming in here next week, I'd be a lot more concerned about Arizona because I don't think they're ready to win a home game after that one. Especially with the late start, kind of a really tense fan environment right now, a little anxiety going on in Tucson. So there's a lot of things at play with that. I don't think they would be ready to win a home game against a ranked BYU team. I think they're ready to go on the road and block out the noise. I really do. I'll have to dig into the BYU tape a little bit this week to discuss exactly what Arizona can exploit about the Cougars. But right now, and maybe this is irrational, but right now I feel pretty good about the Wildcats in this spot going on the road against a team that hasn't taken a loss this year and hasn't really faced a whole bunch of adversity this year and has a couple of good wins on its resume. So we'll see what BYU brings to the table with a bye week to think about all the expectations before that Arizona game on Saturday at 1:00. But I think this is a good spot for Arizona to block out the noise, block out the negativity, and go try and win a football game against a top 20 team on the road. I think they'll have every opportunity to do that. And I think if they bring a similar game plan and a similar play style into the into the BYU game to what they did in the Utah game, they can walk out of Provo with a win and have a lot better feeling in Tucson coming into homecoming in 2 weeks against the Colorado Buffaloes, who look to be a pretty tough out right now as well. All right, I want to remind you to please like and subscribe to the podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, tune in wherever you get your podcasts. That's Bleav in Arizona, as well as on my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldson. Please hit that subscribe button for me. Thank you to Melon Hats for being a part of this show. Thank you to you, the viewers and listeners, for joining us here on the Sunday Six Pack. Texas Tech 28, Arizona 22. The Wildcats will try and bounce back at 3-2, facing a top 20 BYU team on the road next weekend. We'll have plenty of previews before then and touch on some basketball this week. But until then, have a great week and bear down.